Good morning to you. Today is Thursday, the 30th of July, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. Yesterday, we looked at the cross-border operating system, things actually make or help the company with the governance, risk, compliance, their assets, and particularly their performances in terms of the resilience, right? So today we move into the left-hand side of the advisory board operating system that we have in front of us. So we're going to go and focus on this side of the model, which is brand, strategy, and performance. Now, remember that this week we are talking mostly about how an advisory board helps from an external position or external point of view, help the internal teams to see how they go international. This is where many companies or the expansion stories come and stock. And why? Because demand is absent and because the company gets messier as it gets bigger. Right, so this is one of the biggest challenges. So it's a very good idea to go international. It's an amazing experience, though it start to feel that actually something is not right. We talk about revenues also, that actually it feels actually it's a lot of noise, but actually the invoicing is delayed or the exchange rate might be a challenge. And anyway, so there's a lot of challenges that need to be addressed when you're going international. So the story changed by market as well, also the standards. And this is something that actually many times are not considered until you face it. So the partners change the customer experience, even if you have a good partnership, a good distribution, resellers or the ecosystem or partnership ecosystem, as they call it. So, and internally, the teams start making exceptions because they need to sell. They need to go and do things to justify what they are doing. And yourself as a founder or your executive team or your non-executive board of directors gets pulled into more judgment calls than you really need to be in, which means actually the core of your organization, and we spoke about core and the impact of the core of the organization earlier this week. If you want to check those videos, start to get weakened because you start to be demanded in too many places at the same time. So, and slowly, then the business becomes harder to explain. That is the risk that we're going to address today. Why in the innovation, the transformation, in when you go into international places, the strategy start to drift. Too many customer types, too many routes to market, too many local variations, too many exceptions, too much dependencies on local individuals. So all these strategic moves have to be considered because actually it's going to impact the business. So let's take a look at three problems with this. Number one is that the pace of change is not slowing down. What I mean, this is not about your organization, how fast you can go, is the environment, the technology, the customer expectation, the skills, and operating models are all moving. If a business expands while its own internal capability is still immature, those gaps widen across the market. So actually, pretty much you're transferring problems, local problems, towards international markets. So then now you have international problems that need to be addressed beforehand in your headquarters or the place where you're starting or the business started. Problem number two is that management quality is deciding whether change becomes your edge or the opposite side, which is your waste. So international reinvention is not a technology spend issue only, right? So it's not about hardware, software, servers, or whatever you're delivering internationally. It is a management discipline issue. So if your management is not prepared to these kind of changes, you're going to face several issues. If the business cannot absorb those changes, every new tool, market, and offer adds more noise and more problems. It's a real challenge. So you have to be aware of that. And problem number three is that the leadership capacity being under pressure. What I mean with this is international expansion needs decision depth. If the same small group must approve every exception, fix every local issue and explain every market choice, the business had not gone global. It just literally stretched its you as a founder, your executive team, and your non-executive director board to the point that the fabric started to break. So you can imagine that, and actually I have an image for this because I want to share with you, which is this. If you can imagine this international reinvention or going into international markets, it means stretching a piece of fabric across a wider frame. So you have a frame and a piece of fabric. Now you are widening that frame. If the weave of that fabric is weak, growth does not make it stronger, right? It doesn't make it stronger. What it makes is it start to tear it, right? So you have to be very careful when you're going to international, because this image is quite relevant. It feels like that. And people disguise that with growing pains that many times are not really growing pains. It's literally the company started to fall apart slowly, but not as, I don't want to put it as a negative way, but you have to consider that actually when you have these kind of issues internally in one market, when you're going to other markets, these issues are going to amplify. They are not going to disappear or fall into the right place. So, as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. First, use the intellectual property monetization test. And what I mean with this is every business have intellectual property, which means actually you are what you are today because of your intellectual property. What is that? What exactly are we monetizing internationally, right? So this is exactly your intellectual property. What are you monetizing internationally now? It is labor. Is it your team capacity? Is it, for example, a service company that provides consulting or services to other organizations? Is that your labor that you're monetizing? That's your intellectual property. It's your team, the capacities, expertise, the experiences. It is your own reputation as a founder, or your executive team reputation, or is your local relationship that and now you're going cross border with your local relationship. What is exactly you are monetizing, and how you are going to test it? Or is it transferable assets, for example, manufacturing? So it's something that you're manufacturing, you're acquiring another company, you're expanding internationally, but what exactly is that intellectual property that is monetizing your organization further? So that asset may be, for example, processes, methods, brand, how you treat data sets, pricing logic, product structure, operating models, partner systems. So if this is not transferable, your expansion gets expensive and very fast. And transferability, we spoke about transferability early this week, so you can check those videos on my profile. So the second thing I would suggest is use the succession and leadership depth test. And what I mean with this is who owns what. Is very important, because you cannot have a manager or a director that actually are doing brilliant in one country and then give him an expansion responsibility, because this person already is doing brilliant in the places where they are, and people cannot split into, or 1/3 of your job now will be this overseeing this business unit abroad. So, which is the impact on the things that are happening today in your own country. So, and also this decision making. Who makes those decisions? How are issues escalated? How is quality maintained? How is the performance compared across borders? Right. So, is 80%, we spoke about this transferability early this week too. The transferability, 80% had to be standardized to the point that actually you can pretty much bring these working standard operation procedures and workflow to the next country. And the only thing that you localize is the things that are required by, for example, health and safety, cybersecurity, local laws, and et cetera, et cetera. So currencies, all that kind of things. So there's portions that need to be localized and adapted, but probably 80% of the core of your business, if you start to change because you're going to a new geography, then probably you have a challenge at home, not in the new place. So if you as a founder or as a C-suite or an executive director or managing director still act as an operating system of everything in the new geographies, the business is not yet ready for serious international scale, because you still dependable, everything depends on you, or many things still depending on you in your local geography. The third thing to consider is use the going global test properly. And what is that? Going global is not the price for domestic success. And many people say, okay, we are reached the boundaries of our geographies. Now we're going to go cross border. That is not a price. And many companies make that mistake. It is the structure um, um, of transferability, repeatability, and leadership data that actually can be transferred, not the success that you have locally. You might be very successful locally, and is might be encouraged that you don't get outside those boundaries, because you don't have this capacity to transfer your business somewhere else. You cannot repeat the business somewhere else, and you don't have the leadership depth to do the same business somewhere else. So be careful when you're going into thinking internationally or cross border, because you need to look into how repeatable, transferable, and the leadership is prepared to do so. If the company has, for example, a transferable intellectual property and a scalable leadership, international expansion strengthens the value of their company, so it makes sense to go for it. But if not, if you have challenges at home yet to address, think before doing that, because as a product is not going to be a good idea. And this is not to put you down or shut down the possibility. It's just to be aware of what will happen if we don't consider these things beforehand. So international expansion becomes many times a self-harm operation rather than a good success story. So this is where the advisory boards helps, and how they help, asking certain questions that actually might feel uncomfortable, but actually address that, gives you that independent judgment into the gap between ambition and operating reality, right? So the ambition is absolutely fantastic, but there's an operating reality. So let's test this operating reality before going into doing something else. So questions I might come across, for example, is like, the market story is growing faster, very good, than the operating model. Oh, hold on a second. So the story is growing faster, but not the operating model. So how we can match that before going to another geography. So other things I might consider is the brand is expanding, absolutely fantastic, but the coherence is weakening. When we mean coherence, is actually the people are talking about branding and they like it, and they word of mouth, if you may, or a good marketing campaign, but actually delivery, the coherence between what is said in the market and whatever you're delivering, could be services or products, are not, there's a mismatch there yet. You might have very good local wins, absolutely fantastic, but not enough transferable assets. So having a very good partner, a very good logo as in your portfolio of customers, etc., doesn't mean that actually you are going to repeat or transfer exactly the same thing in other geographies. So you have to be careful with that. So that is where you don't need to chase every single opportunity that is in front of you. You need to choose the right to build the future and the capability and transferability before going into the next stages. So what do you gain working with me? Three things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcome, it's a disciplined international reinvention. So because you have to reinvent your organization in a way that actually can be transferable and can be repeatable in other geographies. So the company strength is edge, what it makes it good in your market, instead of diluting what it makes you good as you expand. The differentiator is a rotating international advisory board. So this is built around the exact milestones in front of the company. You get strategic operating models, market design, brand transfers, leadership depth, and governance expertise faster than hiring one executive. These executives exist. The problem is that it takes too long to hire them. They are very expensive, and they take a bit longer even though to produce these outcomes. But an international advisory board, you can have that in 2 weeks, operating and ready to go with a lower overhead than the big consulting firm and no talent locked in. So meaning that actually when the progress you are making and the organization is moving into the places where they want to go, achieving this milestone, we can swap members every 6 months or so to have the most relevant expertise and experience and qualifications in the areas that we are going. And this is reducing the risk of the strategic drift. So the boards avoid letting the market story run ahead of the operating reality of the organization. Now, one action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less. Before your next meeting with your founder team, with your executive teams, with the non-executive, ask for a one-page coherence map, right? We mentioned coherence, and here's a coherence map. Write what must remain standard across markets, and let me pull our visual aid, and I'm going to share this also. So here's our coherent map. Write what must remain standard across markets. That 80% and can be transferable anywhere you go. Write what can be localized. Write who owns each decision. This is very important. Who owns those decisions? And then write which part of the business still depends too heavily on yourself as a founder, your executive teams in the local geographies where you started, or your executive team. So that page will show you whether the expansion is strengthening the edges or stretching it, right? So it's making your company bigger and stronger, or stretching to the point that it's going to break at one time in the future. So let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow we are going to put all the week together. So internationalization only creates value when the transferability, repeatability, resilience, leadership depth, and coherence work as one board system, right? So it's as a whole ecosystem of the organization. Now, if you're a founder or a chair or non-executive director or in the C-suite of a company, and you want an international advisory board to protect the strategic coherence, build leadership depth, and scale with the right assets into new markets, let's have a 30-minute chat so I can understand where you're coming from, where you are today, where you like to go, and how an international advisory board can help you to achieve those expansions that you are looking for. Have a great day, and we'll talk tomorrow again.